Welcome to episode 21 in a series where Bobby Fischerman and his friends travel around Puzzle Island solving chess puzzles. The goal is to try to escape the island, but currently they find themselves separated. Bobby Fischerman is here in the middle of a puzzle competition, and his two friends, Peter Potzer and Average Joe, have been taken to Potzer prison and are trying to solve puzzles given to them by Officer Pawnpusher. Otherwise, they don't get breakfast for that day. If you'd like to catch up on all the previous episodes leading up to this point, I've created a playlist on the channel. You can easily access that. But today, Average Joe is trying to solve Officer Pawnpusher's puzzle, which is this one. This was the position presented to Average Joe. It's black to play, but white is trying to save the game. And so I'll actually go ahead and give you the first move of the puzzle. Black pushes this pawn and gets a queen, and now white has to decide what to do. These pawns are all going forward. It's white to play and save the game. How does white do it? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, this is a really interesting position because white has not just one, not just two, not just three, but four potential pawns that they can promote to queens. And the interesting thing about this position is that they're all bad moves. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look and actually start on this side. If you promote this pawn to a queen, what's going to happen? Well, black's going to play the move queen to a4, check. You have to move over. The queen's going to come down here, check. You have to move over, and you get checkmated. So that's not very good for white. Let's back up, and let's see what happens if you try a different pawn. What about this one? Well, now black actually has an even faster way. Queen to d5, because the queen was covering this before, but now it's not. Queen to d5 check, and checkmate. Again, not very good for white. So let's go back, and you might say, well, this pawn actually looks pretty good because it controls the d5 square, so the queen can't go there, and it defends the c7 square, so that if black tries the same trick, the queen is defending. It looks pretty nice, but black has a separate idea. Queen to f3 check, so bypassing the the d5 square, but the same idea coming into b7 for checkmate. So that also doesn't work. And if we go back and try the last pawn here, again, there's another option, queen to a1, and then checkmate. So however you look at it, whichever pawn you promote to a queen, you get checkmated. So you might be on to the solution here, but instead of getting a queen, you have to get a knight. Actually, I should mention, I forgot one option. You do have the option to move your king over, but it runs into a different problem. But black simply takes this. Again, there's a checkmate threat. So if either of these pawns push, you get checkmated like this. And if you push this one, sorry, going back here, if you push this one, there's a checkmate on a7. Okay, so that was another option, king to b8, but also ends up with you getting checkmated. So the only move to save the game is c8, and not a queen, but a knight. Because you have check to the king, black doesn't have time to checkmate you. They obviously have to move their king. And the trickiest move here is if black plays king to a6. Now, they could go king to c7, but that's a terrible move because now you can force the queen trade. And at the end of all of these queens, you end up with another one over here and you will win. Okay, so black doesn't want to do that. Therefore, they play king to a6. And now if you would like to pause, how does white proceed from here? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, we have the same kind of problem that we had before. If you get a queen, you're still getting checkmated, right? Look at this. Checkmate. Okay. You do this one. Guess what? Queen f3 or queen to d5, same thing. Checkmate. And if you do this one, which maybe looks like the most logical, again, black has lots of different moves, but this one works just as well. Checkmate. All right. So the same problem exists. And so the only way to save the position from here is, wait for it, d8, but not a queen, you get a knight. Why is this so important? Because the knight controls that g2 square. And all those lines that we were looking at, you were getting checkmated, with a queen move like this and then coming into b7. Now you've got it covered with the knight. So black plays queen to d5 check. You have to move over. And this is what I was talking about. There's no checkmate here because your knight is covering it. So now black plays queen to e5 check, and it's white to play. How does white save the game from here? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, you might have been tempted to say, well, you just go back to the corner and you just go back and forth, and black can't do anything. but that's actually the wrong move because black wasn't going to go back and forth. They were going to come into c7 and threaten checkmate here by taking your knight. But if you move the knight, then there's checkmate here on a7. And you actually can't deal with both of those threats. You have two problems here, and you have no way to deal with that. So that was black's idea. And so the only move here is knight to d6, actually sacrificing the knight to give your king some breathing room. So black takes with check. You have to play king to c8. And now black plays king to b6, obviously threatening to simply checkmate you here. What do you play as white? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, maybe you're starting to pick up on the pattern here, but the only way to save the game is to promote, yet again, not to a queen, but to a knight. This is the only way to deal with the checkmate threat here. Well, I should say you could also go here to deal with that, but then you lose your knight with check. And this also leads to you losing the game. Okay, after, let's see, what's the move here? Queen to d6 checks, probably the easiest. And after king to e8, queen to e6. Queen is stopping this. And you can try to run here, but there is a way for black to do this. It's pretty tricky, but it looks like it is. Let me turn on the table just to make sure I'm telling you, yeah, it's a win for black. So there's a lot of, basically it's this. That's what it is. The queen eventually gets here. You have to give up your pawn, and you go into a winning endgame for black. Okay, sorry to get distracted there, but I just wanted to point that out. So the only way, since that doesn't work, the only way to stop the checkmate here is to promote to a knight. And by the way, if you're counting, this is the third under promotion to a knight in the same puzzle. Pretty fascinating, right? And actually at this point, the best thing that black can do is just to give you a bunch of checks. So for example, something like queen to c5 check, you can just run with your king. Black's going to have to just keep checking you because now you are threatening to get the queen over here. And the best that black can do is just keep checking you. You've basically dealt with the checkmate threats because your knights are controlling all of these important squares by your king. And now black has to worry about you getting a queen and losing. And so they just check you basically. And just something like this is an example, right? There's lots of ways that the game could go, but it's ultimately a draw. So just to recap, the only way to save this position after the queen here was to get a knight, to get another knight, to sacrifice this knight, and to get another knight. I mean, it's pretty wild, right? So going back to our story, when Average Joe saw this position, he's a, intermediate player, and he knew that this puzzle was probably going to involve something tricky. And so he calculated pretty easily that if he got the queens, he was going to get checkmated. And then he realized the knights, and he was actually able to solve it. He got breakfast that morning, and we'll pick up our story next time when we head back to Bobby Fischerman in the finals of the puzzle competition. Thank you guys for watching. As always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.